think one of the hardest things that you'll ever do is push play, get ready on today's episode of the wisdom and the vibe and the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day. It's all about bulletproof confidence. As a kid growing up, I wanted bulletproof confidence. I wanted to know that no matter what I did, I'd be the best at. And if I wasn't the best at it, I didn't even want to try it certain times. And I don't know about you, but if you could have bulletproof confidence, it would change the whole entire game. And as I looked at this morning, imagine this. Imagine if you could have bulletproof confidence. You could have discernment, knowledge. You could be calm in chaos. You could be generous. You could avoid foolishness, know what is right all the time, be content, be a light, be celebrated always, have integrity, and work your strengths. And on top of that, have bulletproof confidence. Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So why don't you say we get this party started?
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
Welcome back to the podcast. Bulletproof confidence, bulletproof confidence, bulletproof confidence. It is something that I would like to say that I've got the answer to it, but most likely it's going to come from these little things that we call Inchstones. And I had I wrote out the whole thing. I wrote out the whole thing. And what was incredible was my perspective changed when I got around people this morning. We have a men's group here in Carlsbad every Tuesday from 7:30 to 8:30, and guys come together and we do a thing called Speaking Life. If you haven't heard that episode, yesterday's episode, and the benefits of speaking life, which is using someone's name specifically and something specifically about them that inspired you. This simple practice can change everything, change business, change relationships, all those things. Well, we had a new guy come into our group today, and he was incredible. And he was talking about the fact that he's getting married very soon. He's in law enforcement, and it was a bunch of different perspectives, right? And so we talked about this speaking life, and then we also talked about another thing that I would encourage all of you, if you're listening, I'll explain it. If you're watching, you can see I'm holding up just a notebook. It's just a regular notebook. You could get one of the moleskin ones that you could do. And this literally will change these two things. A pen and the journal will change things, meaning that all you have to do is just write a letter. Write a letter to someone who you absolutely cherish, who you love, and use their name and use something specific, and then be even more specific as you write to them. We did this practice. It took us 4 minutes. So 4 minutes today, we put a time on the clock and we said, write a letter to someone who you cherish. The guy, new guy, his name is Rob. He wrote a letter to his fiance. I wrote a letter to my daughter. Other people were writing to their daughters or to their wives or whatever it is. It's amazing because that 4 minutes seemed like an eternity, but it's not that much time in the scope of the whole day. But if you take that 4 minutes, you write a letter, it can really, really change things. I thought that the whole message today at our men's group was going to be all about like bulletproof confidence. Well, it was, but it wasn't the way that I thought that it was going to be. It was incredible because taking on someone else's perspective. So as we were reading the scripture today, we were reading Proverbs 28, because this is 28th, and when you do the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day. And the reason why, because it's 3,000-year-old wisdom that can be applicable today. And as we read through it, Rob, who's in law enforcement, been in law enforcement for a long time, he said, well, I got to, we read it together, a couple of verses, and then we discuss, what stood out to you, what hit you in your heart. What did it make you think about? What did it make you want to do as far as apply it? And he said, well, I got a problem with this one. And it was all about, the generosity to the poor and giving to the poor and things like that. And he said, I got a challenge with it because of my viewpoint, what I'm exposed to every single day. And a lot of times people taking advantage of the generosity. And so we began to discuss that, and it was great because what I want to tell you is there's going to be times where you read something in the Word, you read something in Proverbs like we're talking about now, and you don't understand it. Well, it's okay to wrestle with God. It's okay to question Him. It's okay to be able to do that because that creates a real relationship with Him. But it was amazing because as we went down this bulletproof confidence thing, I've looked at all of the benefits of it, right? So bulletproof confidence, discernment, knowledge, calm in the midst of chaos, generosity, avoid foolishness, know what is right all the time, be content, be a light, be celebrated always, have integrity, and work your strengths. Well, imagine if we just had that as a blueprint and we were like, oh, wow. If we start off with bulletproof confidence and then we were able to say like discernment, right? And discernment is to understand what is right for you at that moment and not have to worry about anything else. Imagine what it would be. And see, bulletproof confidence was in verse number 1 in Proverbs 28. So it says, the wicked flee, though no one pursues. The righteous are as bold as a lion. And then in verse 2, it goes on to discernment and knowledge and the calm in chaos, right? So when a country is rebellious, it has many rulers, but the ruler with discernment and knowledge maintains order. Imagine if you could just have that. Imagine if you could just have those two, bulletproof confidence, and then, so bulletproof confidence, and then you were able to stay calm in the midst of chaos. And you were able to have discernment and knowledge. Those two things, that would be incredible. Well, in verse number 3, it talks about the generosity always wins. And this, when we were talking about it with Rob today, coming from a law enforcement background, he had a different perspective on it. But generosity is not always just about money. Sometimes it can be spiritual. Sometimes it can be with time. Sometimes it can be with prayer. Depending on where the person is deficient, you can pour into them and you can be generous to them. Not all people that are broke, we're talking about money. It could be that they're broken in their spirit and you need to lift them up and be generous with them. So it's amazing because in verse 3, verse 8, verse 20, verse 22, and verse 27, it all talks about generosity. Imagine if we could apply instruction and it would guarantee that we would avoid foolishness. Well, that would be a simple one. In verse 4, it says this, those who forsake instruction praise the wicked, but those who heed it resist them. And in verse 9, it also talks about this, just applying instruction. Watch this. If you want to get any mentor in the world, all you have to do is ask them specific questions, go out and actually apply the advice that they gave you or the counsel that they gave you, and then bring them back results. That's all you need to do. It sounds so simple, but it's the way to unlock any mentor, any person that you want to give you more. All you have to do is ask them specific questions, apply it, and then bring them back the results. That's all you need to do. Imagine this. Imagine if you had the recipe to know what was right all the time. This is probably one of the toughest things that I've ever seen is knowing what's right at that time. Knowing what's right is one thing, but knowing what's right at that time is completely different. So imagine this. Imagine if you had the power to be able to do that. It says in verse 5, just simply seek God, right? If you seek God, you'll know what's right all the time. Evildoers do not understand what is right, but those who seek the Lord understand it fully. It says it in verse 5 and in verse 14. If you seek God, you'll know exactly what to do at the exact right time. But the hardest thing that we'll do is that we have the tendency to want to depend on ourselves. So just be conscious in this. The next one is being content, right? And contentment comes from verse 6. It says, better the poor whose walk is blameless than the rich whose ways are perverse. Imagine if we could be content in this state where we're at. This is probably one of the most challenging things that I ever go through. I don't know if you go through it, but I do. I go through it. I get challenged with this a lot because I see things that other people are doing. And I just had a podcast, which if you haven't listened to it, go and listen to it. It's Tristan Tritt. Travis Tritt, one of the original outlaw country music stars and legends, his son, Tristan Tritt, was just on the podcast. This guy is amazing. He's a rock star. He has a new song called Sick of It. And what he talked about was consistency, hard work, and humility. Be willing to put in the work, be willing to continue on, and stay humble while you're doing it and fall in love with that, and people will find out at some point. But imagine just being content in any state where you're at. In verse 6, it talks about this. Better the poor whose walk is blameless than the rich whose ways are perverse. In verse 11, it hits on it too. Imagine if you just committed to being a light in people's lives. And so whoever leads the upright along an evil path will fall into their own trap, but the blameless will receive a good inheritance. How can we be a light? By two things: love and data, love and data, love and data, and then add a little grace to that. Love people exactly where they're at. Be truthful with them, but always be truthful with them with grace and timing. Make sure that you add timing to that, because sometimes we think, oh, I need to tell them this, but it's not the right time. How will we know the right time? Well, we can go back to it and say, all we have to do is seek God. Imagine if you could be celebrated at all times. Imagine if there's something, I bet you there's something in all of our lives right now that you did and you weren't celebrated for it. I remember there was a couple times where I washed the dishes, and I hadn't washed the dishes in a long time, but when I washed the dishes, no one said anything to me. And then I was like, why should I wash the dishes? This is the reason why I don't. That's a silly excuse. But imagine if we could be celebrated all the time, right? And in verse 12, it talks about that the righteous will be celebrated always. In 15 and 16 and 18 and verse 24, all these are about the righteous being celebrated. You'll be celebrated by him, not so much the world. Imagine this if you just walked in integrity. To have bulletproof confidence, you got to walk in integrity, because you'll be the same in the dark as you are in the light, and you won't have to hide anything. In verse number 13, it talks about this. Whoever conceals their sins does not prosper, but one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. Be honest with yourself, be honest with God, be honest with others. It makes it pretty simple, right? Working your land is probably the hardest thing that you'll ever do. Doing exactly what you're supposed to do, what Tristan talked about on the podcast. So you go back and listen to it. It's episode 440. The guy is amazing. And what he talked about was just literally just working your land, like working your land. He said, when I started playing the songs that I loved and what was in my heart, as opposed to playing what other people thought would be cool, he said, that's when my audience really showed up. And imagine that. Imagine if you were the happiest performer on the planet on stage. Now your audience is going to connect with that on a different level. What he also talked about was, as an audience member, make sure that you are present with that performer, and that will draw out the best in them. So imagine every one of us has our own music. And once we start playing that music and it's our original music and not playing covers anymore, your audience is already waiting. As I went through this proverb when I first started off, when I heard this concept of bulletproof confidence, how do I gain confidence, right? How do I gain confidence? Well, bulletproof confidence would come from having discernment, have knowledge, staying calm in chaos, generosity, being generous, avoiding foolishness, knowing what's right all the time, being content, being a light, being celebrated always. That would lift me up, having integrity, same in the dark as I am in the light, working my strengths or my land. But then God wrapped it all together in verse 26 and 27. He said, if you want bulletproof confidence, simply walk by faith and not by sight. Because that bulletproof confidence that you think that you want, the only place that will ever be is in me. Not me as Kelly, but God is calling us to have a right relationship with him, and he will deliver. Imagine this. Imagine the bulletproof confidence that I thought that I was building through this whole entire proverb. He switched it around and he said, I want you to have bulletproof confidence in me, in my will, in my plan, and in my timing. This took me back for a second because I was thinking that to be a man, I got to have the ultimate confidence. But what I realized today in the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, 3,000-year-old wisdom, is that if I want to have bulletproof confidence, I'll have bulletproof confidence in him, that he knows exactly where I'm at. He knows exactly what I'm going through, and he knows that the plans that are so exceedingly abundantly more than what I could ever imagine. If you're going through a trial right now, it's not to have bulletproof confidence in yourself. It's to have bulletproof confidence in the one who made you. The corresponding proverb, corresponding day. It's 3,000-year-old wisdom. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I am officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
Nothing more on my mind. I got to shine, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.